Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming tonight. We are in Brasilia. We are at the Getúlio Vargas Foundation School of Public Policy and Government. Today, we are having another session of the webinar for Public Policy and Government. Today's topic is Policies for Innovation and GOVTECH in Latin America. We have the great honor of having three specialists, professors from Latin America, our neighbors, and one of them, Anna, still is having a little bit of trouble, but we may have her joining us at any moment. I would like to thank you, Professor Carlos Santizo, Professor Guilherme Domingues, for giving us the privilege of your presence, sharing your advances and research on GovTech in Latin America. And so without any further ado, I will pass the torch to Professor Fernando Filgueiras, who will be the moderator of today's event. So thank you very much again, and I wish you a great webinar tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kondo. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with Carlos Santizo, Director of Innovation in Government at the Latin America Development Bank, and Guilherme Domingues, co-founder and director of Brazil Lab. FGV thanks you for your participation. It is very important to understand the role of different institutions to promote the development of technology in governments in different countries of the Latin American experience. Before I give you the floor, I need to make a disclaimer. All statements expressed by Fundação Getúlio Vargas employees and guests in our online events and broadcasts exclusively represent their opinions and not necessarily FGV's institutional position. We also reiterate that everyone present here agreed to participate in this event of their own free will, and they consented to be recorded in this broadcast, which will be posted later on FGV's official channels. Okay? Professor Carlos, can you start the presentation about GovTech in Latin America?
Sure, and just like to make sure that, can you hear me? Yeah, good.
Yes, perfect.
Wonderful, wonderful, and thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Edson, for the invitation. It's a privilege for the Development Bank of Latin America, CAF, to be in this discussion, especially with such also good colleagues and friends, Guilherme Domingues from the Brazil Lab, which is really very famous in the world for being an accelerator of GovTechs in Brazil and also an example to others. So while we're also waiting for our colleague from Colombia, just to also share with you some thoughts I had prepared for this talk, I will now share the presentation I have prepared. Let me just see if technology is still with us. Hold on. All right. Wonderful. Can you see the presentation? Yeah.
Yeah, Carlos. Perfect.
Okay. So I have my presentation is in Spanish, so I can. Do you want me to talk in English or just like switch to Spanish?
Well, the language is more comfortable to you. English or
Okay.
Spanish is good.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll do both. But I'll keep the presentation in Spanish, and I'll go and talk about it in English. So we at the Development Bank of Latin America, we've been doing some work on GOVTECH for a while, and this is part of our agenda on the digital transformation of government. That includes digital government per se, but also regulatory reforms, and also integrity reforms, and also and increasingly so working on these issues at the local level. So when we started to work around GOVTECH, you had two understandings of GOVTECH, and there are still two understandings of GOVTECH. The first one, the traditional one, is about government technology, and it's about how you use new technologies to transform government, to transform public services. And it comes from the e-government world, and this type of tradition in public management about, basically putting technology to work to improve service delivery, to improve operational effectiveness of governments. But I think in the last 5 years or so, you have a new understanding of GovTech that has emerged. And that's what Guilherme and ourselves have been focusing on, is new ways of thinking innovation in government. It is not about technology per se, but it's about leveraging technology and data and behavioral insights to change government, to modernize government, but also to change the way it works and to enable to put the citizens at the center. So when we talk about GovTech, and here in Spanish, we talk about the ecosystem in which governments and startups and small and medium enterprises that use digital solutions are working together to provide solutions to wicked public problems, to deliver at the end better public services to citizens. And I think this understanding is quite innovative as well, because it's basically having two worlds meet, the world of bureaucracies and the world of startup, trying to meet and to provide new ways of doing government, if you will, of providing government services. And it's really about a new understanding of innovations. And again, let me emphasize, this is not only about technology, but about digital solutions in government, but it's about new ways of transforming government. And I think the current crisis is also accelerating that agenda, because these type of startups and GovTechs can provide ways to experiment digital solutions before scaling. They can also improve public spending on government technology. And I think that's very, very important, because with the crisis, as we've seen, there's been a big acceleration of the digital transformation of government. And that is going to mean increasing budgets on government technology. And we know of a lot of failures of big tech programs in government. So when we talk about GovTechs, we're not talking about big tech in government, but we're talking about small techs, if you will, about how you can catalyze and incubate change in the public sector. And therefore, I think the context is providing this agenda a renewed boost. Obviously, like 4 or 5 years ago, nobody was really understanding GovTech in that way, in the way the Brazil lab is understanding it. And I think that's really fascinating. I've been working on public sector governance for my entire career, over 20 years. And I think this is providing a fresh way of improving the agility of government, improving the efficiency of government, and also improving the transparency of government using private sector solutions, really. And you remember the new public management theories as well, but it's not only about, it's about bringing again a new fresh air of private sector innovation in the public sector through digital startups. So when we think about the ecosystem, it's important to try to picture it. And the way in CAF, the way we've been trying to, let's say, develop a conceptual framework about the ecosystem of GovTech is about these three main components. You have on the one side, startups that are developing digital solutions based on databases, on behavioral insights, often for the private sector and increasingly so for the public sector. And so they develop the supply of potential innovations that can help improve the way government works. On the other hand, you have the demand for those solutions in the public sector. You have the owners of problems in the public sector. Government is the owner of the problem, if you will, and that is changing also because you have new generations of public servants entering the civil servants that also want to innovate. They want to innovate from within, but also because they're used to innovation. They used to have a lot of access to a lot of services through their mobile phones, and they want the same services from government in the mobile phone, be it digital driving license, digital identity, and so on and so forth. But for this marriage to work, you have something in between that is called public procurement. And it's the ability of governments to purchase these solutions from the private sector. And this is a major challenge as well, especially in the region where you have a lot of challenges related to the culture of public administration, to the people being civil servants being risk averse, but you also have a lot of informality, you have a lot of corruption as well. So that makes that the way public procurement works is really about controlling rather than delivering in some sense. But more fundamentally, and I think what GOVTECH is also putting governments also this challenge to government, is also the need to rethink procurement. Procurement has been thought of the government knowing what it wants to solve the problem that he thinks it knows well, and going to the market to purchase a solution that is really defined. And I think what we see with the acceleration of digital technologies across government is that we don't know the solutions to the problems yet. So procurement needs to also change the way it works in terms of let's say, buying the problem rather than buying the solution, and develop that solution with the provider. So I think that there's a lot of challenge. And so the way we see it is about public policy and government policy. It's about the industry of startups, including investors, and in between the public procurement. And Guilherme will talk about more about that in the context of Brazil also, which is currently in the public debate. So at the CAF, we established a GOVTECH lab about 6 months ago, where we develop a suite of services to our member states. And there you see all of them, but there are basically three main types of service we develop. It's about knowledge, including value for money and return on investment evaluations of these solutions, to know that these governments are buying for good value. It's about also providing services, technical assistance, and grant financing to governments in the region. And we were going to hear about the case of Colombia. We just launched the GOVTECH lab in Colombia, providing support to the Colombian government to do a challenge program and an accelerator. And then we also have a couple of projects that we will be able to announce soon in terms of investment, equity investment in those startups that are providing solutions to government. And the idea there is that also to attend a market failure and to use our funds as a patient capital funds to invest in those startups. So there we have this type of products: knowledge, advisory, and then investment products. And I'll just talk about a little bit about some of those. In terms of knowledge, we developed an index about the maturity of GOVTECH ecosystem in CAF member countries in Latin America, Spain, and Portugal, with 3 dimensions that explains 3 areas, 7 dimensions, and 28 indicators. And there you see the detail of that. But that's what I was talking earlier about, the startup, the supply side of GOVTECH, the procurement challenges, and the demand side from government around a lot of dimensions. And we did this report with Oxford Insight in the UK. That is really an interesting outfit that just released also a report on artificial intelligence and maturity of artificial intelligence in government around the world. So we see the performance of Brazil. Brazil is really quite also high on that ranking, just number 4 after Spain, Portugal, and Chile, in terms of the maturity of their systems. And here we see a little bit more in detail, some of the dimensions of Brazil, and we see that if you look on the left side about the procurement challenge that we were discussing, I think the legal framework is not that bad, but the culture of procurement is challenging for that. So it's, what that tells us is that even if you have the laws, you need to work on the practices. And therefore, it's about cultural changes. It's about changing mindsets of public servants, but it's also bringing on board into this discussion all the audit and control and oversight agencies, the TCUs, the CGUs, and the others, because they are also part of making bureaucracies a little bit more risk averse. And what is interesting in Brazil is that when the CGU, the TCU, and other oversight agencies are using themselves data-driven, data-based, and technological innovations to do their work better as well. But I think overall, audit and oversight agencies have not necessarily been part of the debate in terms of this ecosystem. In Brazil, you see a lot of progress in digital government. And I think what the Federal Ministry of the Economy and Luis Felipe Monteiro are doing is really great about making government more agile, simplifying and digitalizing public services. And then you see also another advantage on the right-hand side is that the industry, the startup industry, is quite mature, if you will, but it provides a lot of leverage to work on. Although not necessarily engage on GovTech itself. I think one of the recommendations we make is that Brazil has just updated its digital government strategy about 6 months ago, and I think more space could be done in terms of how you look at the GovTech ecosystem as part of the digital government strategy of the federal government. And Guillermo will talk about this a little bit more in the one, but we just published last week about a more in-depth analysis about this GovTech space in Brazil with our friends in Brazil Lab, so I'll leave Guillermo to talk a little bit more about the details of those dimensions. One of the things we looked into and we hope to develop is that a lot of the GovTech world is actually a city world. It's a municipal world. It's local. So you really see a lot of activity in cities and some municipalities to find tech-based solutions by local GovTech to provide solutions to municipal governments. A lot of them, like GOVTECH, for example, in Brazil, are working with municipalities. Digital in Argentina or is another one of these startups. So we look at the case of Mexico, Buenos Aires, and Sao Paulo to see also their maturity. That's not a perfect look, but it starts to look at these issues about looking at the cities as the incubators of GovTech innovations, and we hope that next year we will be able to roll out the index at the local level in a lot of cities to see what picture it gives us. But really the message, and one of the findings also of our work in this is really around the importance of local and city governments in particular. In terms of knowledge, and I'll go quickly here, we also produce a lot of policy briefs. I mean, but one of the things we try to look at is the return on investment for local governments in particular to work with local GovTechs to provide digital solutions in public services. And we see that these are not only interesting solutions, they're innovative and use technology, they actually provide value for money for the government. And this is very important as we go forward, because we need to diversify the providers of government technology, and GovTech startups and SMEs are part of this issue. In terms of cooperation, we've been providing technical assistance and grant financing to a number of places, including Colombia, and I don't know if Ana Maria has been able to join us, but briefly, the Colombian government has set up a GovTech lab, which is called My Lab, and they are basically developing a process of challenges, which have been somehow included in their national development plan as targets. That they need to do 24 challenges in the next couple of years. So we're providing them support to do those challenges, but also to think about the incubator in terms of policies, in terms of how you scale some of these solutions, and how you can also work on the policy environment of those. We also been working also with the city of Sao Paulo, and that goes back to the point I was making before around the importance of cities and local governments in this space. And the lab of the city of Sao Paulo is also quite an interesting model to look at in terms of how you incubate innovation in government and how startups like GovTechs can be part of those solutions. And one of the things also we do as a bank, as a development bank, is provide investment in those companies. It has been a little bit of a challenge because obviously this is not a market that is very mature yet. Investors, traditional investors, including risk capital investors, are not necessarily looking at those segments because working with government is not necessarily profitable, especially in the short run. And investment funds from, the innovation funds from a lot of governments are also not necessarily looking at those startups that are providing services to the public sector, but more to provide innovation in the private sector. But what we've been able to establish is to create, it was 6 months ago, a GOVTECH fund that will look at, that will make investment in those GOVTECH companies that are providing solutions to governments to fight the COVID and the pandemic, including the economic recuperation and the recovery from it. So and we've seen a tremendous amount of effort put together by startups all across Latin America and Spain and Portugal to provide those solutions in a cost-effective way. So I think we will be able to announce in the next couple of weeks our first GOVTECH investments. It's not equity; it's going to be convertible debt, and we have a pipeline of several, a dozen or so of those companies. We'll start small, but we start focus on those companies who are providing solutions to governments in the pandemic, and also to close this market failure, because on one hand, the governments are not able to buy these solutions, and on the other hand, the startups are not able to provide it because, again, challenges with public procurement. So we come in as a patient capital investor to try to bridge that gap and failure. Again, I think one of the strong points I want to make also here is what is fascinating about the GovTech space is really how they work with local government. And in Latin America, our main challenge in public administration reform or public sector reform is local governments, municipal governments. And obviously, on the one hand, you have big cities that have their issues, and then you have a whole series of small municipalities. And I think especially for small municipalities, GovTech solutions are very interesting, and they also working with municipality gives them a business model that is also scalable and that is maybe of more interest to investors. And here we start to work with Córdoba, is a municipality in northern Argentina that is a hub for innovation in Argentina, and also they are thinking about setting up a GovTech program and a GovTech fund as well, also as a way to promote local businesses. So I hope I was not too long in my presentation, but that's some of the points I wanted to make. And really also, again, thank you for the invitation, for sharing some of these thoughts. Fernando, back to you.
Thank you, Carlos. Guilherme, please.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Carlos. Great to see you once again, even though virtually. It's good to see that we are always talking about GovTech and in international events and being organized by one of the most relevant institutions, educational institutions we have in Brazil, one of the most important top five of the think tanks rank that we have worldwide, considering. That's the Fundação Getúlio Vargas. Boa tarde a todos e a todas que estão nos acompanhando. Uma saudação também em português para a nossa audiência brasileira. I'll just start sharing my screen, just a quick moment. I have a real quick presentation, and my objective with my presentation will be to just give you a perspective on what the work we do here with Brazil Lab. That's actually a pioneer on the GovTech agenda here in Brazil. So just a quick second. Great. As Carlos was gently saying and mentioning that our work has been recognized now internationally, that's really something we're really proud of, and it has taken a lot of hard work for that to happen, but it's really a reason to celebrate. And when we started Brazil Lab 4 years ago, the GovTech expression was not even known in Brazil, or not even used, or really used in a few environments, specific environments. I just brought you guys a few of my qualifications to be here talking to you tonight about the work I do on the University of Vale do Paraíba, and not only with Brazil Lab, but also with the Institute of Studies in Leadership, Law and Development here in Brazil. Well, as Carlos has mentioned, and I'm going to explain to you guys now, Brazil Lab is the first GovTech hub in Brazil. We were born 4 years ago with the idea to connect entrepreneurs with local governments that wanted to accelerate their digital transformation through innovation, and especially innovation developed by startups. When we started Brazil Lab 4 years ago, we thought that we were at the peak back then of the Lava Jato or car wash operation, which showed a real crisis of trust between the public and private sector in Brazil, because it showed lots of political leaders involved in corruption, as well as lots of big groups, big companies here in Brazil that were involved on those schemes as well. So we were thinking, our drive was, how can we use technology in order to improve governments and also bring new kinds of entrepreneurs and new public and private relations with the use of technology. And we started thinking, why not to use the power of entrepreneurship in Brazil? Brazil always figures among the top 5 most entrepreneurial nations in different international rankings that we have. And therefore, we started a program aimed to focus on the GovTechs, meaning the startups that want to develop a B2G strategy, meaning a business to government strategy, as opposed to B2B, business to business or business to customer strategy that's usually used by those kinds of companies. And when we started Brazil Lab, also we had this vision that citizens want change, and the government innovation should be also from the outside to the inside, meaning that sometimes people from inside the government might have the best of the intentions, but sometimes for different reasons, they are connected or linked or tied to old technologies or old suppliers, and have some sort of difficulty to implement new ways of collaborate and to innovate through the use of technology. We also had a vision that the government shall be 100% digital. I mean, it should be, of course, omni-channel. Government should provide services to whoever are not connected to the internet, but mainly through the internet, where you can have reduced costs, more transparency. And for that to happen, you have to find new ways of cooperation between the public and the private sector. Our first initiative, as I told you, was this acceleration program. So on the very first year, we had 50 startups, so 50 startups that have applied for a program, and then we ran an acceleration of the first batch, so this first class, with 15 startups in challenges that were then related to health, education, and environmental sustainability. Now we have concluded, or just recently concluded on last Friday, our 5th batch, and with that we have accelerated over 96 startups in our program, and we had over 1,100 startups that were interested in the different programs that we had offered throughout these 4 years. We have currently 35 of our portfolio regularly working with the public sector. It might seem odd that I'm talking about a GovTech hub and not 100% of the startups are selling to government, but the thing is, number one, a few of the startups have already died, so it's really something that's normal on this kind of environment. I think over 5 of them already are not existing, and another bunch of them tried to start a GovTech approach, but have quit for different reasons, either for problems on public procurement, for unfortunately not being paid by local governments. So that's something that we're trying to stimulate, as I told you, an agenda and this kind of initiative, but it's not something that's already done. It's a work in progress with many great results so far. But we started, as I mentioned, with the acceleration program. But when we started the acceleration program, we very quickly understood that we could not focus only on the demands, on the offer side. So not only bringing new technologies and new solutions that were developed through startups and showcasing them to this network of public leaders that we have, because every year our acceleration program runs with 3 main modules. So one of public procurement and government relations, another one of user experience, and the third one of social impact, because we understand that every GovTech is also a social impact business. These are the 3 main capacitations and contents that we provide the startups with, but also they have access to a vast array of mentors that can give suggestions and how they can best develop their business or increase the potential of their solutions. But we clearly understood, and they have to present those solutions on the final event that we do each class that we have for startups. That's called our demo day, in which we take the 6 best startups to a panel of judges that includes mayors, state secretaries, people from the federal government, investors, and other entrepreneurs related to the tech ecosystem, to evaluate which ones are the best solutions, and so we can really give them a huge visibility and make them increase their sellings and connections with local governments. But as I was saying, we quickly understood that we could not only work on the offer side. In order to promote truly innovative digital transformation, we had also to work on the demand side, meaning we have to give digital literacy to the public servants, we have to involve them with this agenda, we have to make them understand that it's worth the risk of eventually receiving a notification from a Tribunal de Contas or some control mechanism organ that we have here in Brazil, control mechanism, and even if they receive these kinds of questioning, they will have to provide the correct information and then therefore advance with this agenda. So we started to hold lots of events and also to work on establishing an ecosystem, a GovTech ecosystem in Brazil, connecting these different players and actors in the ecosystem. And other than that, we have to start an advocacy branch as well, because we quickly understand that we needed to provide modernization on our legislation, especially on public procurement, with a few very aspects. The most important of them recently is what we call in Portuguese, the termo de colaboração para teste de inovação, would be the collaboration term for innovation test. There would be a way that municipalities or state level governments could present challenges to the society. And if those challenges are accepted by any sort of startup, they can test the solution for 6 months to a year. And if that solution and the test works fine, that will induce direct hiring from the government organism of the solution developed by this startup. Other than that, we understood that we needed to connect Brazil Lab and the GovTech agenda to international players. So therefore, we have been doing lots of works with CAF. We had this webinar on the past Friday that just released the GovTech report that I'll mention briefly ahead of my presentation, and also developed another initiative that's called the Selo GOVTECH, or the GovTech seal. There is a certification process for startups that did not attend our acceleration program, but are interested in selling to governments and want to have the certification that they truly use technology to try to solve any public challenges. We are, Brazil Lab is an NGO, so we work as an innovation hub, as I said, connecting the public sector to the entrepreneurs. We have a group of sponsors that support this initiative, and we're very thankful for them for doing that. And also lots of partners that assist us in doing events, generating contents, indicating mentors to our initiatives, and we're really thankful for them for doing this. We have over now 30 partner cities that are testing or have implemented in different moments throughout these 4 years the solutions that were accelerated through Brazil Lab. And we can happily say that after 4 years, we have actually put the GovTech agenda on the media. Our founder, Letícia Piccolotto, has a GovTech blog on the wall that's Universo Online, one of the biggest internet portals here in Brazil. Also, we had reports on capa of the cover of Exame at Jornal Nacional. I mean, lots of media because of the work we have generated with that. And we are also preparing now. Oh, I'm sorry. I think it went to the link of the the TV news. Just a second, quick second. And but as I was mentioning, we are working currently on doing an impact report on the work we have done with Brazil Lab, not only with the visibility that we brought to the agenda, but also with a whole number of citizens that were benefited from the initiatives that were accelerated by Brazil Lab, and the number of municipalities. I mean, I can give just one example. GESUAS, that is a software to help and assist secretaries of social development raised from 60 to 100 municipalities after they were taking part of Brazil Lab acceleration program. So there was a really huge increase on the selling process that they had. And lately, as I told you, we just launched with CAFI this report that I was responsible for elaborating and coordinating all the research that was done for that, in order to give a map and a complete picture of the ecosystem, the GovTech ecosystem here in Brazil. We had a few numbers. I'll quickly run through them on the next slides. I just wanted to invite everyone to visit our social media. So Brazil Lab is on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. We also have a YouTube channel with over 2,000 subscribers. We just reached that mark on the event we did last Friday. And you will find there lots of contents on the GovTech agenda in case you're interested to learn more about the work we have done. Also, these are my personal contacts if someone wants to get in touch after this event. But I'll really quickly run through a few of the findings that we had on the report, as Carlos was mentioning. And we have talked about this already, the opportunities and challenges that were brought by the COVID-19 crisis, and that made clear that digital transformation is no more a trend, but it's actually an imperative for governments. Once you have to avoid people getting together, lots of people gathering together, and as well to make new business models possible after all that we have faced, and also the use of technology to trace people infected and diseased and their recuperation and other things like that. We understand that the GovTech agenda in Brazil, it's mainly established over 3 main branches of legislation. That will be our public procurement law, a lei de licitações, the famous 8666 here in Brazil that we say. Also, other than that, the innovation, the National Innovation Technology Law, and also the law for the public companies here in Brazil, the lei das estatais, which brings lots of new ways of cooperation between startups, and also and mainly between startups and the companies of the data companies that we have in Brazil, the public data companies, or as companhias de processamento de dados, as PRODs, here in Brazil, in which we can connect new solutions there. And we're now in the process of building the last piece that I like to say on this puzzle in order to stimulate public procurement as an opportunity for GovTech agenda, that is the termo de cooperação para teste de inovação. Brazil has a great ecosystem for startups in general. So we have over 12,000 startups, over 360 incubators, 57 accelerators, and we have 1,500 startups with potential to work on the GovTech market here in Brazil. We have only 80 that are regular selling or selling on a regular basis to governments in Brazil, but we find that a real good number, considering that this new approach for GovTech is really recent here in Brazil. And we have challenges. As Carlos was saying, the biggest one of them is to make the corporate venture capital come into investments for those startups. Just to give an idea, Brazil had overall $2.7 billion invested in startups throughout 2019. We already know that this figure is going to be bigger this year in Brazil, but 90% of the GovTech startups that we have interviewed on our research initiated their endeavors or their companies with own fundings from the founders. I mean, fundings from their own founders. And we're talking about a really low initial ticket of 100 to 200,000 reais. That's not even $50,000 on the current currency that we have in Brazil. We do not have any single fund, not one single fund dedicated exclusively to GovTech agenda, neither private or public funds for that. And Brazil Lab is only, at this time, with almost 5 years on, the only GovTech accelerator program that's run in Brazil. But those challenges also bring together opportunities, of course. So we need to, first of all, consolidate this innovative culture in Brazil, and to really embrace digital transformation and not be afraid of it, because it might sound weird when I say that, but I have graduation students with 21, 22, 23 years old, that when I discuss with them if they think that we should hire robots to decide repetitive matters on the public administration, I have heard that on tests that I applied, that they said no, because that would take away my job. that's precisely what I do. I have to examine those files and forms, and I don't want a robot doing that. So we really have a big challenge. I'm talking about 23, 22-year-old students on graduation, on law graduation, where I teach. We have to enhance the legal framework that we have, but we really have this minor detail. I think it's much more of a adaptive and cultural challenge that we have than a technical challenge. And other than that, we have, as I said before, great possibility of cooperation between the public technology companies that we have in Brazil and startups in order to improve this agenda. So this last slide is just with a sum up of the points that are already talked about and that we think should be interesting to be implemented in Brazil. The full report can be downloaded at the Brazil Lab website. So if you access www.brazillab.org.br, you can have access to this, the full report. And I think it's going to be really interesting if you can see it and access the report. We have over, I was mentioning just before we started, we had over 300 downloads of the report already with 72 hours that we have launched it here in Brazil. And this is pretty much the general perspective that I just wanted to give on the work we have done with Brazil Lab. And as Carlos said, and just forgot to mention about our international partnerships, but I really need to stress that now we have a connection with Public Tech Lab from Madrid and Idoia and her team there. And also with Bay Brazil, that's the most traditional organization from the Silicon Valley, in order to bridge the gap between Silicon Valley and Brazil. We have been there last year and this year in their events, their annual events. And our startups are also connected to this network. So we have lots of opportunities, but I'll not keep talking a lot, because otherwise I want to listen to Anna if we have the opportunity. But more than that, I would like to listen to questions for our audience. And I would like to once again thank you, Fernando, for the invitation to be here with you all tonight.
Thank you, Guilherme. Carlos, Guilherme, we have your questions. I initiate my question is a big curiosity for me. One of the biggest challenges for the development of the digital technologies, for example, artificial intelligence, IoT, IoB, is that startups and even governments can access the largest possible volume of qualified data. How do you examine the issue of data governance in Latin America today? What are the challenges of the improved data governance in Latin America, in governments, or even in society, or to startups can access a largest big data and qualified data in Brazil, in the another experiences, for example, Colombia or Uruguay and others.
Maybe I'll just jump onto this one because you put the finger on something that is very important, right? It's about data, no? You know, data is the new oil, and obviously is one of the major assets of a lot of big tech companies, but it's also a major asset of governments. And we have a long way to go, because administrative registries are still not so great, no? But this is public data, no, right? Then you have open data, and there's been a lot of progress, but we still have a long way to go to open data, government data that is available. And then you have issues around personal data that is managed by governments, which is more sensible. And then now there's a lot of discussion, especially in Europe, around what they call business to government data sharing. You know, you have private sector data, data from private sector company that is of public interest. And we've seen that with the pandemic, especially telecom data. But I think you point to a broader issue, is that I think maybe unlike new technologies, the advances on data is a game changer. And artificial intelligence is a game changer, right? And it's a different set of issues than using new technologies such as IoT and other things. And in the issue of data, I think the region is unprepared on governing the data, and the data governance frameworks are not necessarily as mature as they should be, especially with the demands and expectations that there are around the privacy of data and the protection of data from cybersecurity attacks. I mean, imagine we had the pandemic and a big attack by some country, a cyber attack that was putting down all our systems like they did in Estonia a couple of years ago. And we will be blind. So there's an issue there. And at the global level, there's a big debate about that. We see that with the digital service regulations in Europe. But we basically have three models. The US, the data is owned by the company. The Chinese, the data is owned by the state. And the European, somehow, that protect the data, that the data is owned by individuals. And in that debate, Latin America is quite absent. We have not necessarily a strong voice or articulated voice. I think we are more aligned with the European vision, but there's an issue about the global governance of data. And I think, and that's something I say, we have a problem with a lack of multilateral forum and solutions for that. There's no international forum to discuss data standards, data regulations, and so on and so forth. I think we need a world data organizations to solve some of these issues around what are the standards, what are the monitoring mechanisms, and so on and so forth. And a lot of debate, especially in some countries around the big tech companies, it's about how they use the people's data, how they monetize it, and so on and so forth. So I think my point there is that, and we see a lot of demand from a lot of countries, especially big cities as well. We've done a lot of work around improving data, releasing data, opening data, but now we need to govern that data in the sense of having a data governance that is strong enough to balance the different requirements there are. Yeah.
Okay, Carlos, Guilherme.
Yes, I'm sorry, I had a little issue here with the microphone. But I was just thinking that the main problem is that we do not have an open data culture in Brazil still. We have done lots of work, and I usually mention on my classes as well that the Federal Law for Information Access, a Lei de Acesso à Informação, it's one of important pillar here in Brazil for new GovTech businesses, because it demands that the public institutions have to provide open and public data. But we for our audience to have an idea, we have 5,560 municipalities here in Brazil, and the pattern of their official diaries in which they have to publicize nominations that they do, public hirings, it's not patronized in Brazil. So you have organisms that just do it in paper and put a PDF file on their website. Some that do not put even up the PDF, they have no access or site or whatsoever for that. And this lack of patterns, it's really bad for people that wants to work with that, to understand how they can better use this set of informations. So there is recently here in Brazil, the Open Knowledge Foundation, their Brazilian branch, just started crowdfunding for an initiative that aims to do exactly that. So to patronize the data from the different municipal diaries, so we can try to better understand those sorts of informations. As Carlos mentioned before, the federal government is doing quite a job, an incredible job, and it has to be highlighted because it's a job that has been kept despite the fact that we had 3 different presidents in the past 4 years. So it's pretty much the same team that's in there doing this job, and led by Luis Felipe Saile Monteiro, as Carlos said. And they're doing this effort to provide. Sejam, for instance, also has a sort of a draft model for which the municipalities can comply with the demands from the law to access information here in Brazil. But I think that's one really thing is we do not have this culture. And we do not have any standardization, so a patronization of these sets of data. So I can start a business here and I can sell it to Brasília or to São Paulo, Recife, or Santo Antônio do Pinhal, that's close here to São José dos Campos. I'm saying it's a small locality. So you can use all those cities with the same patterns. I think this is one of the biggest challenges. And but I think it's something that we have been addressing, but if it's not well addressed, it's not going to allow new businesses to grow from there.
thank you, Guilherme. We have a question from Professor Graziella Testa. The pandemic and isolation brought the issue of digital exclusion or digital divide. Do you see an organized movement from governments to reduce the gap in the public debate? What the policies for reduce the digital divide in Latin America?
Well, if I can take this one first, Carlos. We at Brazil Lab started, and I did not mention it on my presentation, but we have currently a task force called the Força Tarefa COVID-19, a task force COVID-19, in which we open a call for action from startups and also small and medium enterprises. For the first time, we're not only bringing together startups, but also small and medium enterprises for solutions in order to exactly attack these issues. I mean, there were three verticals. One of them was government digitalization, the other one was education, and the third was productive inclusion. And on the productive inclusion branch and on the education branch, lots of the solutions were connected to this agenda. So how can we provide, for instance, new training to a population that has no access to the internet, but has WhatsApp? And that's one of the solutions that's going to be a finalist. We presented them on Friday. It's called LEAS. They have a learning platform that it's a course that's all done by WhatsApp for that matter. I think Carlos can talk a little bit more because they have infrastructure projects throughout Latin America for this matter. I think CAF just released a few funds for that I have followed on the media. But from our perspective, that's an organization from the civil society. What we have doing is trying to showcase those solutions that already exist. And because the digital divide exists in Brazil, and it's tough, specifically when you talk about education, because if you talk about multi-children families, if you have 3-4 children living in the same house, and eventually you have one computer or two, you can't share them. And that's something that affects even the highest income or the medium income here in Brazil. I have 3 kids. So when I have to connect them and work at home with my wife, everybody needs a computer, the internet. So that's a problem for everyone. Of course, it's even worse for the people most in need. But we have to take care to not say, and that's something recurrent in Brazil, because we have those challenges from the 19th century, so basic sanitation and stuff, we're not going to advance within the digital agenda because we have to solve those issues. We have to bring technology to connect those two worlds and make them together. I think we have lots of interesting solutions that were accelerated by Brazil Lab. For this is so I can start additional innovation one that's aimed to do training for programming for low-income communities, and as I said, LEAS, but also TACI and a few other solutions that are designed for for qualification for the new jobs or for training for how does a bartender works on the COVID context. So what are the cares that he has to do to be present there? And I'll leave it to Carlos to talk a little bit more of what he knows that's being done on the infrastructure. My greatest suggestion is I think that should be a prioritization in Brazil. Every school should be a tech hub in Brazil, because then you can make all the services digital, and then the schools are the places for the people that do not have connection to the internet where they can access that. So every school in Brazil, or at least 5 schools in every city, should be a hotspot, so to speak, on internet connections. That's similar to what Estonia did and Portugal did as well, in a way to how can you get the elderly people and make them connect to the internet. So you use the school because you take the grandsons and the grandkids to teach their elders how to use and connect to technology. So I think that should be our main strategy, and on a general perspective, it is happening. But the thing is, we have this asymmetry in Brazil on the different regions and the different states that's hard to tackle.
And we have another question from Cristiano to Carlos. How can we qualify the effectiveness of public policies using the digital government?
Maybe, I mean, yeah, no, it's an interesting question, also quite a complex one. Obviously, the digital transformation of government has many faces, has many ways to look at it. And you can look at different ways in which it improves the efficiencies. And I think the first one is around operational efficiency of government. And that relates to a lot of the automation of processes and the digitalization of a lot of internal processes. And in fact, a lot of governments have tried to improve their effectiveness and measure it by the the extent to which the digitalization of some processes provides value for money. And so you have the internal sort of like operational effectiveness, and that there's ways also to measure the extent to which bringing digital solutions improve the effectiveness. If you look, for example, at Argentina, what they did under the previous government, where they studied, which was quite interesting, they said, before trying to simplify processes, let's digitalize them and measure, the improvement in cost effectiveness of the service that they provided, and they were able to measure that. And also, by digitalizing services as they are, you could understand them better, generate more data, so that you can then improve them better. And also, the government of Peru has done that, is that just by digitalizing, you don't need to change any law or regulation. You just take it as it is, and you don't have to fight the political fight sometimes that you need to do to simplify some of this process, and you still can generate efficiency gains. And that's able to measure. But I think the real issue here about effectiveness of those solutions is about quality of services and satisfactions of citizens with their service providers, the service that they are providing. And there are not many ways that governments are measuring this increased satisfaction by the service provided. I think there was a report a couple of years ago by the Inter-American Development Bank about Wait No More that was trying to measure some of these things. The government of Chile is also doing some satisfaction, because at the end of the day, the efficiency is the satisfaction of citizens, the satisfaction that they get from good quality services. And I think the last point I would make there is that, again, it's not about technology. Portugal, for example, has modernized its services using behavioral insights more than technology. You need to think about the user's experience throughout the process and rethink the process according to that user. And therefore, you can improve the effectiveness of your services because you build it more around the user. And for example, the judicial reform, digital transformation of the justice system in Portugal has been fascinating because it was really about changing the experience of people going to the courts with the courts. And it's just like by, the trajectory that we're taking physically and trying to automate, make a lot of process more automated. But it's really about thinking about people, about the user experience, the user trajectory, that you can improve then satisfaction with those services. In a lot of cases, it's actually, it's more about perceptions, the way people are treated, the way they are serviced, and that's why a lot of governments now are going into predictive public services, where now it's not you that has to remember that you need to take out your new ID or a driving license, but it's the public administration tells you, hey, you need to do it, and these are the ways you do it. And it's really going back to the point I was making earlier about, public service is about serving the public. So you need to understand and reshape the services according to the user.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Another question. Another problem with GOVTECH is the relationship between startups in your hand and governments in the another hand. How is the relationship? How improve the relationship between startups and government to create a full GOVTECH perspective?
Maybe I can go there. I think I would start with one thing is that don't sell the solution, buy your problem. So the first thing is about governments to understand better their problems and develop a better sort of understanding of the problems, sometimes with other users as well. So it's really, start with the problem that you want to solve, and then think about developing a solution without knowing it, in the sense that, and that's the point about procurement. You basically try to co-create the solution with the startup market. And that, I think, what's fascinating of some of the work that Brazil Lab and other accelerators are doing is that then the owner of the problem in the public sector needs to understand its problem better, and then can go to the market to find what are other solutions out there that could be, a good fit for purpose, without necessarily having a closed mind about it, and then start to experiment. So I think that, it's about changing also some of the mindset, and the relationship will be changed in that sense. And I think we're going there because, in government, you have more and more younger people coming in. The new generations are digital natives, and they expect this type of ways to do business as well in government. And the digital startups, what is interesting is that you have also a movement among startups that they don't only want economic profits, they want to do good. It's startups for good, and they want to have a social impact and a public value, especially now with the crisis that has even strengthened. So you have this, relationship building is quite important. And I think that the last point I would make is that's why GovTech labs are quite important, because they're a meeting place between these two worlds as well. There's a way, it's a way to incubate innovation, and you have different ways to do it. The British are doing it in a very sort of private sector way, looking at the market. The French are doing it more incubate innovation, GovTech incubators within government structures. You have different ways to do it, but providing this space for people to develop and co-create solutions together, I think it's the right way to do things. And that's how some of these spaces can be developed. I think it needs both sides to work together. Last point I would make also is that in the GovTech sector in particular, very important to have investors, social impact investors that are also investing in those solutions. And I think that's where we in the region, we need to develop those markets and the risk appetite by venture capital funds and other investors in that space.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment on Carlos' answer, because the thing of the working with the problem rather than the solution, it's key. It's key for the startups. There's this classic, even a T-shirt phrase that says "fall in love with the problem, not with the solution," because sometimes people get so passionate about the solution that they want to try to change the problem. And we really would like them to be able to present challenges. So to bring this challenge methodology to public administrations. And I think one important aspect is this. It's not that because you're hiring a startup, you're hiring the best solution, or startups only always have the best solutions. That's not the idea behind stimulating those kinds of business. The idea is because if it works, it can escalate quickly. These new business models that are developed by startups, they can escalate quickly, but if they fail, you can quit them quickly as well. So that's an important way that these new companies work, that I think can benefit from the public sector. Other thing is, lots of these startups, and we show that on our report here in Brazil, are using the software as a service model for selling to governments. And that's something that's not really contemplated on the public legislation for that. So you have limitations of at most 5 years contract that you can do. So it's 2 years that you can extend for 2 more years. And eventually you want to customize the software. You want to do some specific settings for that. So that's something that will really need to be changed in order for that to fully develop. But the reason is it's really this, because these new entrepreneurs have this new mentality, this new mindset, as Carlos said, and that's, I think, something that can benefit the governments as well. It's not hiring the startups just because they're startups, but because of the new ideas, the new models, because they fail fast and they can escalate fast. But that doesn't mean that there's no place for big tech companies or stuff like that, or other forms of partnership with, for instance, in the public concessions agreements for public infrastructure that we have in Brazil, where you can add up startups to do specifics on some services that they have.
Just to add on this, if I may, just because you know, Guillermo is right on spot as well. GovTech doesn't mean it's not going to work against big tech. It's going to work with big tech as a way to improve big tech solutions to government. I think it's no way that a small GovTech startup will be able to provide the kind of services big public administrations need, but they can provide the experiment and the sort of solutions that they could use and before they scale. And I would say that the last thing is also governments, especially in this context, can use public procurement of government of these type of technologies also to promote local SMEs, local, let's say, startups. And then they can really be catalyst of innovation, but they can also be, you know, diversify the providers and promote a new segment of the economy, especially also releasing the data again. And these startups can use that data to develop also new markets.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Carlos, Guilherme, unfortunately, we have to finish. We have another questions. I send it to you, these questions. It was great to have you participate in this webinar. I hope that at some point we can see each other in person and move forward on this important agenda, which is GovTech in Latin America. Thank you to all who attended. I extended my thanks, and now I finish this webinar. I returning soon with another questions and a great event. And now is good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando, for having us. It was great. I just want to reinforce our pledge for everyone that was watching to know more of Brazil Lab's work on the social media and to download the report we recently launched, because I think it's a really good piece of work and it can be very, very helpful for everyone interested on the theme.
Hey, yeah. Thank you, Glenn.
And thank you also for the Getúlio Vargas Foundation for the invitations also, and I hope that everyone who has listened to us has been able to learn something, and look forward to continue on this agenda.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.